summer, they're doing mission work, and I found my heart and soul. We didn't have, to make it very brief, we didn't have running water. We were in this little village, and we were building a 3-story house that ex-drug addicts from Moscow were going to stay in. But the funny thing is the house wasn't finished. Like, there was no windows and no running water. There was an outhouse in the back. You had to walk a mile down to the spring to get water every day. And all the drug addicts were there. And then we had people from all over the world. I think I'll never forget, one night at dinner, we had 30 people, and I think there were like 10 languages being spoken simultaneously in the room. There were a couple of us Americans, and then just from all over. And so on the 3rd floor, there was an adoration chapel. Well, it was a chapel, and I begged the priest in charge to let it be an adoration chapel, and he let me, so that at least he would send me up there to pray. And there wasn't a whole lot a teenage girl could do. I mean, they're building. This is heavy stuff. So at first he was like, well, you're a girl, go organize the kitchen. Well, it was driving me nuts because they were doing construction, and every time I cleaned and organized, these men would come in and like dump everything out. And I was like, Father, I'm not doing this again. Like, every day it's the same thing. And I never forget, then he was like, well, my laundry needs to be done. So I found myself outside with all the men's, like these people's dirty underwear, hand scrubbing in these big bins. And I did all 30 people's, laundry. And he was like, yeah, you did a good job. That's great mission work. And he made me cook for everyone, and that was incredible because it was like army rations from Germany and canned ravioli from Italy, and like we'd have to go try to find a store that had an egg. At that time, communism had just fallen, and there was nothing in the stores. You'd go in a store, and there might be like a loaf of bread, a crucifix, an egg, and a shirt. And so, like, that's just kind of what you got. Communism had just fallen. And so then there was a hospital. And I wouldn't call it that because it actually had barbed wire fencing on these cages outside. And they would just throw all of the residents in there all day. And it was the men's is the one that let us at least come. And he'd say, well, Mary, go down to the hospital men and love them. And I'm like, do what with the men in the cages? Like, I don't even speak the language. And he's like, oh, come on, you've got a gift of love. And so I would go down, and they'd gone to the bathroom on themselves, and like the nurses, they were just awful. It was like the ugliest of communism. And so I'd go and I'd sing, and I'd let them out, and I learned my first Russian phrase, I don't understand, "Yani понимаю." And I would just, the nurses would be screaming, and I'd say, "Yani понимаю, yani понимаю." And, we'd let them out. And I remember one day him saying, we're going to go down and bathe them. And I was like, go right ahead. And he was, he's like, well, Mary, are you coming? And I said, no. And I was out hiding up in the chapel, and he sat down on the floor next to me, and he's like, Mary, listen, we all noticed that you have a particular gift of love from God that's different than ours. And when God gives a gift, he gives it with a responsibility to use it. You have a moral responsibility to go love these men. I will see you down at the hospital. And he got up and left. I pouted my way down there and had to keep them all in line. That was my job. But you've got handicapped men who are like stripping themselves, running in circles. And it was just a mess. But that planted that seed of love, right? He didn't say, this is your vocation to be a big missionary, or, can't you be maternal? What did he say? Love. Just love, Mary. Get down there and love. So fast forward, I go to Notre Dame, and I know I'm called to something missionary-y, right? And I meet some hermits that invite me down to South Texas. And I decided to do a year of discernment down there with them. And the head priest was awesome. He said, he felt strongly that young people should take time to pray about their lives. And so he said, I will provide you with a place to live, and you divide your time up the way you think with the amount of solitude and prayer that you want. And then if you need community, You can come and join us for a meal. There's a library. If you need work, I'll give you paint to paint something, or, just his spirit was very good. But there were these group of sisters down there, and the head of them had left some very liberal, questionable religious communities out east, who didn't believe in the Eucharist anymore and didn't like the Pope, and she didn't want to be with them, and she came down there, but she was very wounded. And she started getting so mad at me because she said I would make a terrible sister. And I said, sister, I'm not here to be a sister. I am here with a deal with the head priest who said I could live in a house. And she was mad I wasn't going to her for direction. And I'm no, I'm going to Father Pat, he invited me down and this is kind of our thing. And thank you for inviting me to dinner, but I prefer to eat alone. Well, it got to a point where, long story short, she kicked me out of the women's community. And Father Pat was oh, what am I going to do with this sister? And he's don't leave. Do not leave, Mary. You are right in this. I don't really quite know how to deal with it. But, there's a house between the women's and the men's community, and we'll just put you there. And I was what an awful, year of vocational discernment. You get kicked out by hermits for not being social. I was Lord, you're not really helping me, right? Well, he's but there's one little thing, it's kind of infested with rodents. And I'm okay, we can do this. So I took my, styrofoam stuff. I learned a lot about repair, and I shut in every hole. And I always tell people ask them what's worse than waking up with a snake in your bedroom is waking up with a snake skin in your bedroom. And that used to happen because you're where's the snake? So I get it all cleaned up and I move in. And then these other problems start, and things are banging, and there's all this ruckus at night, and I go to Father Pat the next morning, and I said, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but there is something really crazy going on in this house. The lights are going on and off, and he laughs, and he goes, well, you know where I got that house? And I said, no. And he said, somebody over in Corpus Christi said it was haunted and they didn't want it, so we just moved it out here. But nobody's ever experienced anything. And he goes, do you want to just live in the computer room at the men's community? And I said, no, doggone it. Sisters are not kicking me out of my hermit year, Rodents aren't kicking me out, and no souls in purgatory are. And he said, it's got to be souls because they aren't trying to hurt you. They're just making noise. He's and he was an exorcist, so he knew. He was if there was something wrong really bad, you would be harmed, and they're just scaring you. So he did masses, and we got rid of that. And everybody who comes there now says, I named it St. Francis house, because I was Francis, get rid of the rodents, And they all say, even to this day, it's the most peaceful house there. So, it really worked. He just prayed his little prayers there and had mass or two, and it all worked. But it was just this is the beginning of my vocation journey, So I'm I'll just go back to Russia. And one of the seminarians who was from America with me in 1994 had become a priest. And this is in 1999. I contacted his community and I said, I heard he's going back to found a mission in Siberia. I want to go. And he said, well, let me talk to the founder and the head priest guy in Rome. And he called me back, and he's the head priest in Rome will call you, and this is really weird because normally we don't let someone as young as you, who's not even part of SALT, their community, found a mission. But everyone in prayer said Mary Kloska is supposed to be in Russia now. So they invited me down to Texas for a year of discernment. Did that just go out, or is it okay? I don't know. Did I step on it? I can talk really loud. How about I talk really loud? Can you hear me without it?
Yeah.
Maybe I was too loud at mass. I think that's what it is.
Well, maybe I can turn it up a little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. But if I'm too loud, I don't want to disrupt
You're
it.
good like you are.
Okay, I can do this for a short period of time. So, I got permission and moved down to South Texas and kind of went through some formation, and it was supposed to be a priest, a sister, and me. Well, right before we're ready to go to Russia, the priest gets terrible heart problems, ends up in the hospital, and eventually he dies. And it's just Sister and I. So we show up in Siberia at the bishop's residence at Irkutsk. We're supposed to be in Krasnoyarsk, which is 1,000 kilometers away. This, just to give you an idea, in Siberia, my diocese was physically bigger than the entire United States. So, like when we had diocesan meetings, we'd have to train 1,000 kilometers. So what is that, like 800 miles? I'm bad at the conversion, but far. Okay, and I was closer. Some of the people had 3-day train rides, the ones way up north. So, he's frustrated, the bishop, because he's like, I invited a priest and said a sister and a layperson could come. And they just send me a sister and a layperson and no priest. Plus, lay people don't belong in missions. And that's kind of an old Slavic idea. Today you wouldn't need it. But back in 2001, a lot of those old, he was from Poland, so a lot of the old communist countries had this idea of the church that's very different than ours today. So he did not like me. And then when the morning I came out, and they're like, sit anywhere in the breakfast room. And I was like, okay, I'll just sit here. And he comes out, and he sits down, and Sister comes up, she goes, you know you're sitting in Bishop's seat. And I was like, a great start to my trip. Why didn't you tell me? Well, we didn't want to make you feel bad. And I was like, he's already angry. It was very nice. And he actually ended up getting kicked out by the KGB, exiled, because they did that to us Catholics. So, I end up in Russia. And, Father Flanagan, the founder of SALT, before I went, I had said to him, I'm a little worried about going because I really wanted to get married. And I don't know my vocation. Does God not want me to get married? I'm not going to find a husband in Russia, And, I can't figure out my vocation. And he said, Mary, do you want to know God's will? And I said, absolutely. He said, have you prayed about it? And I was like, for 7 years at this point, because, I started praying for my husband when I was 10. I actually threw him out, but I had letters I would write of prayers for him. That's all I ever wanted. And he said, and you listen. And I was like, 5 to 7 hours of adoration a day. I'm trying. I might not be professional at it, but, that's my life. And he said, and you hear nothing. And I said,